Yeah, what a year it's been. I definitely want to talk about how the year was for you and sort of what surprised you the most in 2025 and areas where you still see opportunity. Because, as much as we want to extrapolate the trend into the future, when I sober up and think about 150% increase in silver and a 70% increase in gold, I say, yeah, it's going to be hard to top that in 2026.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, from current from current price levels, I'm certainly not expecting a repeat. That's for sure. That would be that would be shocking. I mean, I tend to I tend to agree with uh, uh, the words of I'm trying to remember where I saw the quote because I'm pretty sure he stole it. Well, I'll just go with it because I'm pretty sure he stole it from me anyway. Um, but I can remember thinking when gold was 1,000 or 1,500 and it had decent moves and we had a fairly decent market liquidity wise and stuff. And you talk to guys who, for lack of a better phrase, are gold bugs, and they'd be talking about 15 or $20,000 gold, and I think to myself, I, I suppose it's possible, but I'm trying to envision a scenario where we've got $20,000 gold and something else very big and important isn't totally fucked up. I'm not sure it's something I really wish for. I'm more than happy with where this stuff's trading now. We've got the kind of prices that generate great margins, and that I think will increasingly probably mean good results get rewarded at an exploration and development level. I'm expecting to see more outside money come in as the year rolls on. So I mean that's the setup for really good gains if you're smart enough or lucky enough to pick companies that make discoveries or grow legitimate discoveries. So that's all I'm looking for. I'm not hoping for you know insane prices. I just think if that happens, it's because something else has gone sideways.
Yeah, actually, I'm about to press publish on something probably in a couple hours, and you'll see what I said about that. Yeah, I'm not $20,000 gold may be inevitable. I mean, I think it is inevitable, but we may not like the context in which that price level is reached, and
Yeah,
the way the world is. And yeah, it's it's a little
I mean it
daunting.
is. I mean this is partially. You know, I've for 3 or 4 years now I've said the real kicker for the gold price was when the sanctions were put on Russia, and that spooked a lot of other central banks, just knowing that their reserve assets could be messed around with. Because I mean, if they're U.S. Treasuries and stuff, or you know Euro bonds, whatever they are, the government that issued those securities is always in a position to do something to make your life difficult, since it's their paper. Gold's one of the few asset classes, arguably the only one where there's no counterparty risk. I mean, gold, you buy gold, there's no counterparty. You own it, that's it. I think that drives a strong gold price for a significant amount of time. I don't think that's a cyclical change. I think it's a secular one. I don't know how much that in and of itself moves the price at the end of the day, but I do think that's the change is here to stay. And that's not to say I disagree with the sanctions. I'm I'm probably putting a target on myself, but I'd love to see somebody put a bullet in his head personally. So I certainly have no problem with it. But I think that was a very fundamental change, and I think it drives a fairly significant amount of demand for bullion that I think is here to stay. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
No, no, I don't think it is. And I think that the main, if we had to just make it one soundbite, one sentence, one paragraph, what's driving the gold bull market since 2022? It's a multipolar world. It's a world that is not just dominated and led by the U.S. and the dollar. And China is emerging. It has emerged, and that trend is not ending very, very, very
No.
clearly.
No.
Before we get into it and talk about some individual companies, I just want to make sure that the listeners, are we both coming through 100%? Can I get a thumbs up or a couple thumbs up from the crowd? Just because to do this whole conversation and then have poor sound quality, when I put it over on YouTube is never fun. So I just want to make sure that we're good for the listeners. Okay, good. Thank you. So I love talking to Eric for a number of reasons. Probably the most of which because he's an OG in the metals and hard rock mining industry. I
Old
think
guy.
you're an old gangster, an OG. So yeah, like 40 years or something, right? So
Yeah.
you've seen a lot of different cycles. And what before we get into the individual stocks, which I know everybody wants to hear you talk about, what is different about this bull market in the junior mining sector that you see today? And I mean in all aspects, whatever
Yeah.
comes to your mind versus the ones of like say the 90s or the early 2000s.
I mean, one thing that really changed between the '90s and now is the willingness, I guess, of investors and I guess more to the point management teams to accept significant share dilution is a lot higher than it used to be. I mean, I think back to the mid '90s, which is when we started. My late brother and I started the newsletter, and that was an insane market. I mean, that was sort of when the world was really opening up, and exploration companies were going to countries that were, formerly off limits, and because they were going to these great places with, you know, big metallogenic endowments, they were making discoveries. They were finding really impressive deposits all over the place, and because back then share structures were much tighter, it was not uncommon to see, you know, 20, 25, $30 share prices were not that unusual. It's pretty much unheard of now. And that's, I think that's partially a measure of the fact that we've been through some pretty long bear cycles in between. And during those cycles, if you're management, you got to kind of keep the company going. So you just suck it up and you do placements at the prices you have to. So it's, these days, it's not that uncommon to see companies with 100, 150, 200 million share counts, which was just, you never saw that back in the day. And the other thing that's changed is, I mean, a lot of areas have been gone over, the countries that are, verboten, those change from year to year and decade to decade, depending on internal politics of those countries. But I think we're at a point now where, all the super easy, obvious stuff, I think in most cases, has been worked over. So it's probably a little bit tougher. You're seeing more, blind deposit discoveries, discoveries based on geophysics or deep geochemical modeling. It's not the mid '90s where guys went into Chile and Argentina and they were just flying around in choppers and going, "There's a color anomaly. Let's put a drill hole in it. Voila, there's a deposit." It's not as easy anymore. But the colliery, the other side of that, the positive, if you want to put it this way, is it's tougher. You got to be more selective. But it also, that change also means, anybody expecting the mining sector to wave a magic wand and go, "Yeah, sure, here's another, 10 million tons a year of copper." That's not going to happen. It's going to be hard, and that means metal prices are probably here to stay when it comes to staying high and maybe going higher. I mean, you look at something like copper, like, I don't know what the high end is going to be for copper. It's certainly higher than I would have even imagined 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, 7, 8, $10 a pound. I mean, none of those numbers look silly to me anymore. I wouldn't have even, I mean, I would have laughed if somebody talked about $10 copper 20 years ago. But it's a different world. There's more demand, and it's harder to find this stuff. So, you know, from the mining sector to the rest of the economy, God bless you, but you're going to have to pay up.
Yeah, really good points, Eric. I mean, so we're not going to just find a porphyry with 2 billion tons at 1% copper at surface anymore, Eric?
I'm I keep looking for the company that's going to do it, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's pretty different from the 90s when you could just find these porphyries in South America at surface.
Yeah, these companies went into new countries, and company after company after company was coming up with these, amazing deposits. And it's not, you know, it's partially just because those were countries that were opening up. It's not that there was anything special about what that particular set of geologists at that particular time period was doing. They simply got a chance to get at these things that were off limits before. That's not really the case anymore. There's not many areas where, somebody hasn't at least sort of given it a once over. It's just not going to be as easy as it used to be.
yeah, yeah. And so what we're seeing is people are still finding new things, but they're having to go deeper and really think outside the box. And
Yeah,
we have so many modern tools now. I mean, the toolkit that an explorer has in 2025 is far superior than the one it had in 1995. But also
yeah,
that's basically just compensating by it's so much more difficult to find something that is economic, and you're probably going to have to go 500 meters deep to find it at least.
yeah, yeah. It's not as easy as it used to be. I think we probably see more and more underground deposits, which I don't personally think is a bad thing. Back in the day, my late brother Dave, who went to a mining school, um, he used to always shake his head because back in the '90s, nobody wanted to hear about anything that wasn't open pit. It was just like don't even talk to people about underground stuff. And Dave used to shake his head and go, people don't realize in this day and age. I mean, you can get down to 60, $50 a ton. And he said, if you're dealing with good grade, he said, a lot of underground mines they actually are significantly more profitable per ton. The open pits are and have bigger margins. But he just said nobody wants to hear about it. I mean, there's like a decade there where if you're an explorer, you had to be looking for open pits. Nobody wanted to hear about underground, but I think those days are over. I think people realize if you want to find something significant, you're probably going to have to go deeper. And in this day and age, you can mine stuff efficiently up to several thousand tons a day and make, you know, it's pretty good eating if you find a good grade deposit. It'll be profitable, very profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's a choice at this point. I think that's obviously the trend in the sector, although everybody still wants open pit. Um,
Yeah.
so how was your 2025, Eric? And what surprised you the most, either in your portfolio and the stocks that you watched? Like, was there a big shocker, that you had this year?
There were a couple of stocks that did extraordinarily well. Um, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn or anything, but yeah, I made a shit ton of money this year. Um,
Yeah, that's
a
good.
couple,
That's good.
yeah, um, a couple of stocks have done really, really well. I mean, Goldgroup surprised me. I know the guys behind it, and I know how strong they are on the market side, but even so, it's just like the thing just kept going up. And I think they've got lots of cash now. They got Eric Sprott in. They've got to do a couple of deals to justify the current and higher prices, but I think those are coming. I mean, I know they're negotiating on several things, so I'm expecting to see a couple of announcements fairly soon of significant acquisitions from those guys. I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was deserved all along anyway, but I was pleasantly surprised by the nice strong move that we've seen in San Lorenzo, which I was, you know, I own a fair amount of that stock partially because I was the bid when nobody cared, and it was a real head scratcher for me because that's one of those projects that before these guys came along really hadn't seen any drilling. There are some, small to moderate size um, mines that were kind of run by locals on that property, but it had never really seen a lot of drilling. But you looked at the different targets on that property, and they all looked fantastic to me. And I was just like, what am I missing that nobody really cares about this stock? But they drilled a couple of good holes at Serra Blanca, which is a new target, and then suddenly everybody knew about and loved the stock. And like you said, it was that's one that's potentially open pit. They've got another target slash zone, I guess, zones on that thing called Arco de Oro, and that's a great looking target that I think is probably going to have 2 or 3 million ounces. But it was high grade underground, and nobody cared. Everybody wanted to see quote unquote open pit holes. That's what got everybody interested.
San Lorenzo Gold is definitely one I wanted to talk to you about. So you just gave me the open door. So what's the latest on San Lorenzo? I know I talked to Al like probably 6 weeks ago. It's on my YouTube, but since then they announced the financing. It went
Yeah,
oversubscribed. They closed portion of the financing, but they're
yeah,
still drilling, right?
yeah. I mean, it was the drill program was frustrating. Has been frustrating for Alan, just in the sense that he said, the drillers, he said they're good guys. You know, when they drill well. The recoveries are good. The hole goes where it's supposed to. But he said they're slow, and they had a lot of mechanical problems. So the drilling ended up going, much more slowly than he had expected it to. And also in Chile, as in quite a few other places, the assay lab turnaround is not great. I mean, last time I talked to him, I don't know, 10 days ago, I mean, he was pretty pissed that they hadn't seen any assays yet, but he said it is what it is. And, he said we were looking at the drill productivity in terms of how fast holes were getting done and how slow the assays were. And he said I was starting to get a little bit nervous about running through them, because he basically lent the company $1 million for the program. And I was one of the guys all along who was saying, like, just do a financing. But Al's a very stand-up guy, and he'd said several months ago he wasn't going to do a financing until he had assays, and he didn't want to go back on his word, which is laudable. But I was one of the guys going, like, just do a raise, because to my mind I was like, I want to see 10 or 15 or 20,000 meters. Like, let's go. Let's quit screwing around. They'll be able to do that now that they're going to do. I think it's a $6 million raise when it's all said and done, and it was massively oversubscribed. So lots of people aren't going to get what they want, even at $6 million. But one thing they can do, and he's not sure if they'll do it, but he said one big advantage of doing 10 or 15,000 meters is, there's probably 3 or 4 other drillers that would be interested in talking to these guys about doing it. He said part of the problem, I think, was these guys are doing, 2,000 meter, 2,500 meter programs. It's busy in Chile like it is everywhere else. Most of the drills are spoken for. And most of the drillers, they saw a 2,000 meter program. They're like, oh, I'm not even going to bother bidding. Like, that's just not big enough. So I think with a much larger program, if he wants to, he can probably bring another driller in, because he'll be able to attract bids with that size of program. And he told me, he said, look, he said, this money is all about drilling. He said, you can take it as a given. We're going to be drilling till, June, July, August, whatever. We're just going to keep drilling.
Yeah, diamond drilling is probably the number one challenge in the junior mining sector right now. Quality diamond drilling. This is across the sector. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter whether the company is in Idaho or Arizona or Chile or Africa. There are problems consistently with diamond drillers, and they just don't make them like they used to, it seems, both in
no,
terms of the quality of the rig and the technical skill of the teams. Um, and just people don't want to work as hard. I think that's just
yeah,
a worldwide thing.
yeah,
And
because
diamond drilling is hard work.
diamond drilling's hard work, and it tends to be when you're in camp, when you're on the job. I mean, diamond drillers tend to work, 12 7/12s. I mean, basically 12-hour shifts every day until the job's done, which is not easy. It's hard work. I mean, they get very well paid. Don't get me wrong. They're not. It's not like they're getting minimum wage. I mean, good drillers that are getting good bonuses make a lot of money, but it's hard work, and a lot of people they just can't handle the hours and the difficulty and the working 12 hours a day for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks. It just blows them out. So the drillers, like a lot of other companies, they've got to do these days anyway, they've got to do 2 week turnarounds and fly guys in and out and stuff like that. It complicates things, and you don't have the same driller on the rig all the time. And there are guys that are just really good, that have a really good feel for it, and they're the guys that tend to get a lot of productivity. They don't lose core, they don't lose holes, and you see less and less of that just because you've got so much turnaround now, and so many relatively inexperienced drillers, which wasn't the case back in the day.
If you're a junior mining CEO and you're listening to this conversation, if you find a good drill team, keep them and pay them double. It's worth it.
Yeah,
It's worth it.
yeah.
100%. With San Lorenzo, going back to 2022, because remember, like, I was around when you were talking about it, and I remember buying San Lorenzo at 8 cents, 9 cents, but eventually I gave up on it at some point in like 2023, and I came back to it in 2024. Um, what is the lesson from that? Like, they had some good drill results early on. It's in a great mining country. I mean, porphyry country, gold, copper country, one of the best mining countries in the world. And it was getting very little respect for a very long time. Could you put your finger on what?
I mean, I think what it needed really, and he was, Al's always been fairly involved. I mean, he's a pretty successful entrepreneur. He's mainly out of the oil and gas sector. He wasn't really a mining guy, so he didn't really have the connections back then with guys like me, basically. I started getting some attention. He basically took over day-to-day management. There was a guy there before, the sort of the IR VP corporate development guy was really the guy managing the company. And I mean, I'm not going to name names. I don't want to sound like an asshole, but I guess I'm about to. Um, I invited them to MIF when I first started following them, and I was very underwhelmed by this guy's presentation, and frankly by his lack of knowledge about the company itself. Because I can remember doing an interview with the guy and thinking to myself, like, you should just know the answer to these questions. I'm giving you softballs here. That's not the case with Al. Al's very, very involved. Terry's very involved. Terry's another guy. He's lived down in, I mean, he's Canadian, but he's lived down in Chile for a long time, and I think he just wasn't as well known by the guys up here. But like I've told two or three other analysts, I mean, I made this crack on CEO in the channel, but it was something I'd actually said to a couple of guys who were, geo/analysts, going like, yeah, we should get a younger guy who's more with it. I mean, Terry's like 70 something, and my comment to them was, so tell me about this property that you found, you staked, and where you have a 90% hit rate across 4 different targets. I'll wait. The guy's done a great job. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. His hit ratio is quite good. That gives me a fair amount of comfort. I mean, there's clearly a relationship between gold grades and oxides/sulfides at Cerro Blanco. There aren't enough holes. There'd be no real point, I don't think, in trying to figure out how strong the correlation is. Not yet, anyway. There's just not enough drill holes to give you something statistically meaningful. But it's definitely there, and these guys are pretty happy with what they're seeing. So I've got high hopes we're going to get some pleasant surprises, fairly soon, I hope, from the assay lab.
Yeah, San Lorenzo, one of my best performers in 2025, and I do have optimistic feeling for 2026. Let's talk about some of your other favorites
Yeah,
from the past. Founders medals. What's new with
yeah.
founders medals?
There, I think a lot of this. I think they got a bunch of frustrated shareholders, but I mean, the stock's 450. It's not like it's the end of the world. I mean, I started following it and owning it at about a quarter, so I can't really complain. I think they're just in that sort of pre-development phase where they're doing large drill phases. If they could find another, if they could find another real high grade, another Froyo or something where they had a new zone where they were pulling, 20 meters of 20-gram type holes, which they occasionally do with some consistency, I think you'd see the stock move again. But I think it's just in that period where, and you saw this with Great Bear. I mean, Great Bear had a couple of periods where it had fairly long periods where the stock kind of went nowhere. And I think, I think what was happening was you were seeing a changing of the guard from people that chiefly are interested in sort of cheap early stage stock and people that really want something that's almost development level where they've got a lot of comfort there's going to be a resource. It's kind of two different types of shareholders. And I think when you're seeing that movement from one shareholder type to the other, it's not uncommon, even with a company that's having a lot of success, to go through a year or two where the stock basically doesn't go anywhere. Well, that change is happening. I kind of think that's where Founders is right now. It would definitely help if they could find a new, if they could find a new high grade zone where they were really pulling some hot drill holes time after time. That would help a lot. And I think they've just kind of gotten to the point too where they're viewing it as, much larger pre-development drill programs, and they're going like, we're not going to put out every drill hole. Like we'll put out 5 or 10 or 15 holes at a time. We're just not going to bother doing it more often than that. So I think that's why you've seen the stock kind of flatten out over the last, most of the last year. But I'm not that worried about it. I'm very comfortable those guys are going to have a deposit, probably a sizable one there. So I'm happy to be patient and just wait and let things unfold.
Yeah, I mean, all things, considered with Founders, I think it's trading fine. And it's just in that stage of its life cycle where it just needed to calm down and cool off and get ready for the next leg. Sun Peak Metals, Eric, this is
Yeah,
one that has been frustrating for a
yeah,
few years, but
yeah.
I feel like something's about to happen here.
I think maybe it will. I mean, I was a little, it was unfortunate at one level to see a bunch of dilution with that deal that they did to pick up those projects in Saudi. But in all fairness, I think it was a fair deal on both sides. A lot of the guys that were large shareholders of the Saudi company were also large shareholders of Sunpeak, so they weren't trying to be difficult to screw the company over. I think it was a fair deal. It's the same rocks. I mean, those guys know those rocks. I mean, the technical group behind Sun Peaks, they're the same guys that found that Bisha deposit for Nevsun. They also found a couple of deposits for their previous incarnation before it was taken over. These guys know how to find VMS deposits in this set of rocks, and they have some very nice looking targets. I mean, Greg told me, he said, you'll see more news once we get into the new year. You know, some of these projects haven't had that much work, but he said there's other ones where we've got or will quickly have results we can talk about. And apparently, Saudi Arabia is one of those places where apparently the government's quite gung ho about generating some hard rock deposits and adding hard rock mining to the oil and gas sector. So he said, in terms of dealing with the government and drill permitting and work schedules, stuff like that, he said it's like night and day. He said, we love Eritrea and Ethiopia in terms of the geology, and he said we love both those countries, but he just said it's just so hard. Uh, the politics are so difficult, and then they've got internal problems there, and that's just made things next to impossible in terms of being able to actually safely work in different areas. He said Saudi Arabia is just like the opposite. It's just here's a concession, here's all the permits you need, here's all the access requirements. Have at it, go for it. So they're pretty pumped that they're going to be able to get a lot of work done in 2026 and generate a lot of good results. So, and I think they probably will. I mean, it's a group I've known those guys a long time, and I've got a huge amount of respect for their technical ability. So I think with a set of projects like they've added in Saudi Arabia, I think the odds of those guys making a discovery are actually pretty high.
Yeah, I was happy to see them pivot from Eritrea in Ethiopia to Saudi Arabia, and
Yeah,
that's
they got great
obvious.
projects there, but it's just so hard. Like it's just
Yeah.
so hard pulling it
Well,
off.
it just goes to show like the jurisdiction matters a lot in mining. And if the jurisdiction is just not working, if the safety is not there, or the government is not cooperative, then you just kind of have to move on, you know. Sun
Yeah,
Summit Minerals. So this one put out a banger hole in November, although I will say it wasn't necessarily a new discovery. It was still very
yeah,
impressive. Over 80 meters of like 5 grams gold from pretty much near surface. But then they immediately went and did a financing.
yeah. I mean, I've owned this company a very long time. The guy that used to be CEO and chairman, I mean, he's still a like very senior, hands-on guy, but he's kind of semi-retired now. Bob Willis and I are pretty good friends personally, so I've always had a soft spot for her because I got a soft spot for Bob. But yeah, I kind of understand. I mean, the guy running the company now, like he just said, look, part of the reason why we were able to get this project in the first place is, it was owned by three geos, fairly. I mean, if you know the sector as long as I have, fairly well-known geos, very talented guys, and they've never done anybody any favors when it comes to the option agreement. It's not a cheap option, and Neil, probably rightly so, just said, look, you know, the first thing we got to do, we know this is a great project. We know there's going to be resources here. We got to get through this option agreement. Like we got to get it done. And I think it's like a $15 million spend altogether, which they will have done in 2026. By the time they finish the next phase, they will have done all the required spending. Um, and unfortunately, they weren't getting any love early in 24. And this is sort of an example that what I talked about right at the start about companies and share structures. He just said, "Look, we got to bite the bullet. We got to do a full scale program, and we're just going to have to issue what we have to issue to get it done." I was expecting them to get more results out. In all honesty, before they did another financing, I was a bit surprised they didn't wait for a few more results. But again, I think he had a market to work with, and he had guys offering him money, and he just said, "I'm going to take it." So I'm a little disappointed, honestly, that the share structure has been blown up so much. That said, I do think that project. I'd be surprised if they have less than a couple million ounces now. I think it's pretty much a done deal. They'll get to 3 or 4 million ounces between two or three different zones, and that's one of those that Tutagon area, the surrounding properties, ranch, the thesis projects. Somebody's going to take that out at some point, and I think when that happens, there's pretty good odds Sun Summit goes away with thesis, because collectively, there's three companies there, maybe four, depending on who's counting, all of whom are working on projects that are clearly going to have significant resources as a group of projects. And it's the same, the property Sun Summit has and the properties that thesis have. I mean, it's the same mineralized system. I mean, it's all one big system. That's a 10 million ounce plus system. So I think it's probably a given a large company is going to own that whole thing at some point in the next, I don't know, year or two. Someone's going to take. There's not that many 10 million ounce deposits around, so I think it gets owned by somebody much larger here before the next year or two are out.
I have a feeling it's going to be a company domiciled in Australia because they seem to really
I
like
wouldn't be surprised.
they seem to really like BC. Pan Global, Eric. So you said Sun Summit, you kind of annoyed the share structure got so bloated. Here's another one,
Yeah,
Pan Global, over
yeah.
300 million shares out and can't seem to keep any momentum.
No, I mean that one's frustrating too. I mean, I really like their projects. I'm a big fan of Tim Moody. I think he's a great geo, but they just can't seem to share price wise, they can't seem to get out of their own way. And that's another one where they decided they had to bite the bullet and do, large enough financing to really move forward. They've got a nice, you know, they have a nice resource at Romana. It's not, it's not in, I wouldn't say it's insanely good. It's 30 plus million tons of about, 0.45, zero point 0.5 copper equivalent. It's in a very good area for mining. There's mines on both sides of it. The geometry is very good, so it should be it should be a very mineable deposit even at that size and grade. I mean, honestly, what I'm really hoping for is on that project, Escacena, which they recently just enlarged quite a bit, or on a couple of their other projects that they just flat out make a new discovery. I mean, they've got some pretty interesting gold holes on their other project, and that's not a project that was actually known as a gold project. That's not what drew them there initially. They just kind of realized the gold was there, and started trying to target it, and pulled a couple of good holes. They also have some really nice VMS targets. Essentially they're gravity targets in the right rocks. At Escacena, there's several of them they haven't drill tested yet. So I mean, really, my fingers are crossed that they make a new discovery, because I think that's really what they need to get the market to care. I mean, the market's sort of pricing Romana already, so they're not going to get a lot more juice from that. They need to find something new to really get the market to care again.
Vizsla Silver. This has been, I believe, one of the biggest wins you've ever had in your advisory service, in your alert node. I
Yeah,
believe you initiated it at 25 cents, so now it's almost $8 a share. 2 billion market cap in the US, which I
yeah,
never thought we'd see. And they are within, I think, 6 months of maybe getting a permit there in Mexico.
yeah. I mean, it does look like, it does. It looks like they're going to get it done permit wise. I mean, when I talked to Mike, he says, like, it's not, Mexico's Mexico, but he said we're not running into any great opposition. He said we're getting good feedback and pretty timely feedback um, from the government. So he said, he said this is an area where there are a couple of small existing mines. So he said, it's not like virgin territory where there's no disturbance or anything. So, he's pretty confident they're going to be able to permit the thing. It is a little mind-boggling that they have a $2 million market cap. But that said, I think Panuco is probably the best undeveloped silver project in the world by a pretty wide margin, and they still haven't really completely drilled it out. That thing looks like it's a shoe-in to be 500 million ounces, I think, plus. It's just a matter of drilling stuff off. There's a lot of stuff on that property that still isn't drilled off. I mean, most of their zones are still open, and there's a lot of stuff on that property they haven't even really drill tested yet. I mean, they've stuck to building resources in the areas that they know are good, but there's still lots and lots of targets on that thing that don't even have a drill hole. I mean, it's just that good a project. That's why it's got that market cap. I mean, I sort of still mention it as, look, obviously the stock's not going to do what it's already done again from this price. But if you want to play silver and you want something that's, to my mind, about as safe as something is going to get at the development level, so you're not going to get giant gains. But if you want something that's going to track the silver price, it's a pretty good choice. I don't see those guys screwing things up. Like, I just don't think they're going to. I think they'll get it over the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely getting a premium valuation because they're a
Yeah.
unicorn. It's just the most popular question that I get asked in the last few weeks, or the most popular question I've been asked, is, "Give me some silver stocks, Robert. I need some silver stocks." And I'm like, "Well, sit down here, young child. Let me teach you about silver stocks." And I can never just give out the symbols. I always have to explain it. and how explain how rare it is to have a true silver stock, a true
Yeah.
silver miner. And Vizsla is a rare example of a primary silver producer, or soon to be miner.
Yeah.
They'll be actually producing more silver than gold in terms of the payable amount of silver than gold in the first several years of the mine life there in Mexico.
Yeah.
And 500 million ounces of silver. I mean, I think the number of juniors that can say they have 500 million ounces of silver, I could probably count on one hand.
Yeah.
To be honest, really. And especially primary silver. There might be some poly miners that have a lot of lead and zinc that also, or tin, and have a lot of silver too as a byproduct, but it's not silver
Yeah.
primary, right? So I think Vizsla really gets premium because they're on the NYSE, they're silver primary, they're super high grade, they're a unicorn. But yeah, now they have
Yeah.
to prove it, right? If nobody buys them, they actually have to prove it. So Eric, I want to talk about the US, a few miners in the US. Talon Metals was, in my opinion, the stock of the year in 2025 in the junior mining sector, because not just the move it had, but because of the fact the company was basically on life support. They had maybe even one foot in the grave in Q1, and they
Yeah.
end the year on a fantastic high and a position of tremendous strength. So I know we talked about Talon previously. What are your thoughts on the latest transaction with Talon Metals?
Yeah. I think I think the deal with Lundin is a brilliant deal, um, for both sides, really. I think Lundin decided these guys have got the projects and the exploration ability to maybe possibly add some tonnage and add some pounds at the actual mine site. I don't know what's being drilled on that property well enough to know how much room there's for discovery. I mean, obviously, Talon's got their own discoveries. Vault is just an insane zone. I don't know how big it is, but I mean, honestly, how big does it have to be with grades like that? I mean, if you got couple of million tons of that stuff, you're home free pretty much. And I think staging things, I think it's a smart thing for Lundin to do. Um, they pass it on to them. They get a significant shareholding in Talon. Talon gets sort of immediate cash flow they can use to keep going, because I mean, obviously they were one of those companies we both know that had the dilution issue. They they got a lot of shares out, to put it mildly. But I just think those guys have shown the ability to make amazing discoveries, and they have a lot of ground still to work with. So that's one where I think the odds of those guys finding something to extend that mine life are fairly good. I don't know if it would be worth moving Vault or that far. It probably would. I don't know if that would be their preferred method, but when you're dealing with the kind of grades you got to Vault, you can move that stuff a long way to a mill, and the numbers are still going to make a hell of a lot of sense. So maybe that's what they end up doing.
They're still saying that they'll ship it by rail to South Dakota, but who knows? Yeah, the
Right.
the plans can change very very quickly, all depending upon what happens. Then, sort of like Sun Peak, Eric, a stock that's been dormant for a few years. Your friend, Michael Carr, his BTT has also been dormant for a few years. Oh,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that
Yeah.
one as we begin 2026?
I like the gold project a lot. I mean, it's we just we just talked about difficulties with drillers, and of course he had those. He got so frustrated with the lack of productivity with the guy that came in to do RC drilling for him, that he finally just got rid of the guy, and he's got a new driller coming in a few weeks. I like that project a lot. I mean, I like the nickel project too. I wish it was. I mean, he's got some targets there that he hasn't drilled yet. I wish LM was bigger, like physically bigger, in terms of the discovery that he made, and he did make one. He doesn't have a huge amount of space, grow that thing. But he does have a fair amount of land still to the south that hasn't really seen any drilling or anything yet. That has some decent looking targets on it. And again, if he can find, you don't need to find a lot. I mean, if you can find a few million tons in one of these high grade nickel systems, I mean that's all you need. You don't. It doesn't need to be tens and tens and tens of millions of tons. I mean, you can have a relatively small deposit as these things go, and it's still going to be quite profitable work. And I like the gold project a lot. I think those are good looking targets. I thought it was, Mike's a very practical guy. He was working on a shoestring, so he did stuff that is it's slightly unorthodox. I think it's good. I mean, I think doing those pH surveys was a smart move. I know the guy that developed that concept, and he's used it in two or three other projects quite successfully. And those targets make a lot of sense. I'm quite excited to see what they get when they get a better driller under that thing in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that is supposed to. So the drilling at Nighthawk there in the Walker Lane is expected to start by the end of January. So I'll be looking for that news release early in the new.
And I don't know. I haven't talked to Mike in the last few weeks. I mean, is there anything in the lab? I mean, did they get holes done before they finally
No,
threw up his
no,
hands and
the
covered
one
them?
in the I guess the 1.5 holes they attempted didn't get through to the target horizon. So it wasn't even
Right,
worth sending to the lab. It was pretty much a futile exercise. But now we have
right.
what I have heard is the best RC driller in the state now coming in to get the job done right in January. So I'll be looking forward to that. Um,
Yeah.
what other U.S. juniors do you like, Eric? Are there any other names on your radar in Arizona or Idaho or anywhere else?
Um, I mean, there's a couple that I own that I haven't really talked about that much in the newsletter. One called Prince Silver, and it's a perfect example of what you were talking about a few minutes ago, where it's not really you know, it, arguably it's not a silver project; it's a zinc project, uh, but it has a silver component. And when you get to the point where you've got 70 or 80 or 90 or who the hell knows what amount per ounce, the silver gets more and more important. And most of their stuff is only running 40, 50, 60 grams per ton, but it does have significant scale potential. So it could ultimately be a lot of silver ounces when it's all said and done. So that's one that kind of looks interesting. It's got a pretty good group behind it when it comes to marketing ability. So I think if they latch on to something, they'll certainly make sure that the market hears about it. Another one that is trading fairly well because I think they've attracted a couple of really good, strong shareholders is, Headwater Gold. I mean, I've got a lot of time for those guys. They're very smart geos. They have a lot of projects, some options, some not. Their whole basis was to go in and look for, they, they went into things, like we talked about at the start here, on the assumption that they probably weren't going to find anything literally sticking out of the ground. So they looked for evidence that they're, at or near the top of an epithermal system at surface. So I mean, they're looking for those alteration zones, and basically metal ratios that you see at the top of an epithermal system, on the assumption they're going to have to drill to find the higher grade stuff. And they've got, I don't even know how many projects they've got now, like 15 probably. Some of them options, some not. But that's one of those companies where I think there's always potential for those guys to make a discovery. It's a very exploration driven deal. It's trading pretty well lately just because we're in a better market, but they certainly have the ability to make a discovery. Another one that's working predominantly in the southwest U.S. because they got they got screwed over in Mexico. Not to put too fine a point on it, and that's Almadex, which is Dex on the venture. Almadex did it's a very smart couple of geos, father and son team, Dwayne and Morgan Poliquin. Morgan, he did most. I think his PhD stuff was mainly porphyry related. So, you know, similar to Headwater in a sense. They went in. There's a big swath of the right rocks, the right age rocks. He did a lot of regional work in the Southwest U.S. They've staked a whole bunch of projects, and again, you're generally looking at lithocaps and stuff that's not porphyry sticking out of the ground. It's basically the alteration caps that are hopefully sitting over a mineralized porphyry. He's got a bunch of those. He's drilling. I think he's drilling one right now, but I expect him to drill 2 or 3 properties this year. They're in the they're in the enviable position of having a pretty tight share structure. And because they did a couple of smart deals selling a gold discovery that they made in BC, where they, this was like 15, 20 years ago, these guys mined, I don't know, I can't remember what the total was. It was 50 or 60,000 ounces out of it high grade, quite profitably, small scale operation. They sold that project and then sold the royalty on that project, and because of that, these guys are sitting on about 15 million bucks. Their market cap isn't actually much larger than their bank account, and they actually own. They don't have the problem that everybody else seems to have with drillers, because they actually, part of what Almadex owns is a drill company, a pretty successful one, that they grew in Mexico so that they would have their own drills. They've moved some of those drills up into the U.S. and there have been years where those guys actually make, the company makes like $1 million on the drill division. But so they've got the drills, they've got the projects. That's another one where they don't have a big obvious discovery yet, but the potential is always there for those guys to pull a boomer, and them are off to the races. And because they got so much cash, that's going to be one where if they make a real discovery, that stock's really going to move because they do not have to finance, which is a pretty big advantage.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, so 2 big things I've learned in 2025 is when the company doesn't have any warrants left, it gives a lot of torque to the share price, and then even better is when they don't have to finance, it gives a lot of torque to the share price.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty rare that we've seen that in the past, but in 2025 there's been a few examples of that have been fantastic. Yeah, with Headwater Gold. So it's interesting. I remember I met with those guys at Beaver Creek in like 2022, and I like their Idaho projects. They had one slide in
Mm-hmm.
their deck with the Crane Creek project, and they had one other project. And there are these really nice epithermal gold projects there in Idaho. And but they were like, no, we're not going to drill those. We're just waiting for an option partner to do something with those. And they finally 2025 is the year they got Centerra in there to put some money up to drill Crane Creek. And it looks like they have a good earning agreement there on Crane Creek, where they can still keep 30% for themselves, and Centerra has to spend 25 million and complete a PEA on the project. So yeah, suddenly I think Headwater was one of the many examples in 2025 in the junior mining sector where it didn't matter, and then suddenly it mattered. And boy, did it matter a lot very quickly.
Yeah. Well, and those guys are they've always been very good at negotiating option agreements. So they've got several strong option agreements. You know, I'm, I don't think it's a big secret. I'm kind of a swing for the fences kind of guy. I mean, I love the exploration process. So I'm probably one of the guys, telling them like, 75, 80 cents, like, fuck it, just sell 10 million shares and go drill a few of these things yourselves. I mean, why not? Like, take a shot. But they've been, and I think they will. I think you'll see them. I think they might drill 2 or 3 of their own projects this year. But they were very focused and very consistent, and they kept a lot of you know they kept a lot of I don't know, I guess you could say they stuck to their plan because they're, the plan from day one, this was what they were going to do. They were going to focus on generating targets and try to bring in third party money to spend the heavy dollars, and they've done a really good job of that. I mean, and they have a number of really nice looking projects that still aren't optioned yet, and some will probably get options, some maybe they'll drill themselves, but these guys have stuck to the plan, and it's starting to work now. They're starting to get attention. He was frustrated by, when I talked to him a few months back, he was quite frustrated the market didn't seem to care, but it looks like the market's starting to care now.
I'm just curious here. Just this is my own curiosity. So I'm going to ask this question for my own selfish reasons. You read my Substack. You see some of the stocks I focus on,
Yeah.
Hercules and Kingfisher and Andina, et cetera, et cetera. Do any of those either drill targets or companies strike your fancy? Is there any of those, the ones that I talk about on a regular basis, that you're really interested to see what happens in 2026?
I think Kingfisher's got some interesting targets. I mean, I like Hercules, but I'm still waiting to see. I don't know. I'm still waiting to see something get pulled together that looks like it's really, like it's really going to have strong economic potential. I mean, they've obviously got some great targets there. I think the silver might turn out to be a surprise with that one. I mean, maybe those guys end up with a very significant silver resource, um, on top of the porphyry copper targets. They do have some stuff that really looks like it could have some legs, and again, silver goes from 15 to $20 to 80 to $100. Those those silver targets suddenly start looking pretty juicy. Um, definitely worth going after on top of the porphyry targets.
You're preaching to the choir, Eric. Look, let's wrap it up
Yeah.
with a final question. Get your final thoughts. I guess a two-part question to round out this New Year's Eve conversation for you. Are there any areas of the market or the junior mining sector that you're cautious on now, that maybe just you think it's run too far and you don't really love it here? And then the second part to that, to make it really hard for you, to two-part question, what's the biggest opportunity that you see heading into 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly confident, by and large, with the metals that have gotten most of the attention: gold, silver, copper. Um, copper's definitely got some supply issues. I mean, obviously, with base metals, you always worry about the economy tanking. It doesn't look like it is. I mean, there's some signs of weakness in the U.S., but it's not like, you know. I think it's a bit early to say it's really rolling over. Uh, you always worry about Orange Julius doing something really fucking stupid and you know going just ape shit with tariffs or something like that to really choke things off. But so far, at least, it seems like the U.S. economy is kind of chugging along. Most of the major economies are growing, at least if they're not doing fantastically. So that all seems fairly positive. I mean, copper, I think, has the best supply demand of the base metals. It just looks like it's going to have to go higher for the market to see the supply they want. Gold and silver, who the hell knows? But I'm pretty happy with where they are now. So I think we've got prices where the market will reward discoveries. I would expect, I mean, slash hope, going through 2026 that we see more outside money come in. I mean, we've seen some, but not as much as I would have. If you'd asked me when gold was $1,000, or are we going to see generalist money at $4,500? I mean, would have been like, well, yeah, duh. We've seen some, but not as much as I would have expected. But for me, that's actually part of what I guess you could say is the opportunity for 2026. There's still plenty of room for outside money to come in, and there's way, way, way more money outside the sector than there is in it. So if we get the market's attention to the potential that we might at these metal prices, you could see a hell of a lot of money flow into the sector, and and that's what'll really start moving stuff. And on the opportunity side, I mean, I'm an exploration guy. I mean, that's what I love. I love seeing new projects and new targets get tested. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm always looking for new deals where I think guys have potential to make a discovery. Because for me, that's where the excitement is, but that's also where the really big gains are. Not to put too fine a point on it. You make a discovery in a good market where there's lots of liquidity. That's where the money is.
Can you imagine a junior with a reasonably tight share structure that makes a silver discovery in 2026?
Yeah, the stock would just go
Nirvana.
ape shit. I mean,
Nirvana.
yeah, yeah.
Eric, thank you. This was a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate it. I know the listeners did as well, and all the people that will hear this on YouTube over the coming days and weeks. So thank you for that. And yeah, let's see those gold miner earnings. Yeah, go
Actually,
ahead.
one last company I want to mention, and I'm mentioning it for selfish reasons because I own a bunch of it because my late brother and I were actually founders of the company. I mean, I don't have any direct role anymore, but I still get asked advice, and that's one that had some big news early this week called Precipitate Gold. They, speaking of, dilution, they're doing a pretty large placement to a bunch of Dominican guys, a couple of funds, and three or four of the richest guys in the country, and they're actually good. They're kind of a good example to close off with because it's an example outside money because the main guy who I haven't talked to yet, but Jeff's talked to him a million times. The guy said, mining's just not a thing in the Dominican. Like there are very successful mines here, like Pueblo Viejo, but he said for Dominicans, it's never been a thing for us. We just didn't care. We do real estate, we do industrial stuff, but because of metal prices, I assume a couple of these guys decided, well, maybe it's time to get on board with this mining stuff. Those guys are doing a large placement. They did a large placement with Gold Quest. It hasn't hurt Gold Quest at all, in part because they've got this long-term view and they want to own pieces of miners. So they're very tough in the sense that they want to own a significant percentage of the stock, but you're selling to guys who aren't going to be traders and not flipping it out for the warrant. And this is, the DR is one of those places where politics is not easy. And I think it's changed the complexion for Gold Quest and hopefully it will for PRG because those guys, it sounds like the opposition to Gold Quest project it's all but disappeared, and that's because these guys who are part of the 100 families, if you want to call it that, and these local funds, they've got a lot of political clout, and they own a lot of the media, and they're really pushing the story that mining's a positive thing. So I think that's an interesting couple months to watch, not just for the exploration, but for the politics, because those guys really seem to be having the ability to get Gold Quest project over the finish line when it comes to permitting, which by no means looked like it was going to happen before these guys came along. I mean, those guys have been beating their head against the wall for like 8 years, permitting wise, and really not getting anywhere. But suddenly things have opened up because the powerful local guys have decided, this money stuff's kind of cool. Maybe we'll get interested in that now.
Yeah, the magic of $4,000 gold.
I'm sure that's what it is because it's not like these guys suddenly decided they were fascinated by ball mills or something. It's gold went to $4,000 and these guys who really had no interest whatsoever before are suddenly going like, yeah, maybe we should look into this mining stuff.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not too much of a good thing. There's definitely been some
Yeah,
increased attention on gold and silver in recent days. Oh,
yeah,
by the
yeah,
way, while I have you, that reminded me, you're talking
yeah.
about the DR. Do you think Newmont actually finally does it and makes the move for Barrick in 2026?
I think it might. Yeah, I mean, you can see some obvious synergies. you can see how a merger would work, and maybe they do some geographic split up and spin some of the stuff off into a new entity. But it wouldn't surprise me. It seems like a fairly obvious move, and Newmont is the obvious company to do it if it happens.
Yeah, there's only so many ways that Newmont can grow at this point, and that's by far the most obvious one.
Yeah.
All right, Eric, thank you. Fantastic New Year's Eve conversation. This will be up on my YouTube in the next couple of days. Enjoy your New Year's evening, everybody, and see you on Monday. Cheers.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Rob.